Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games of the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Joel Clark, and we are going to be talking about 36 Chamber of Shaolin for our episode of Wuxia Workshop. This is a 1978 film directed by Lau Kai-Leung, and it stars Gordon Liu, and also has a terrific villain appearance by Liu. Everybody knows about this movie. It's like, it's a classic. I don't think we need to rehash all the details. There are other podcasts who have gone over the plot in pretty good specifics. So I think what we want to do is mainly talk about it in terms of gaming. But Joel, just because I don't know if you've seen this before or not, what was your reaction to this film?
Actually, I had a couple of reactions. I was surprised at how much nuance and reaction I had out of the thing, because it's really a very simple movie. A guy has a tragedy happen. He goes to train, and then he gets really good, and he goes and gets revenge or not revenge, but like vengeance and justice for the tragedy that happened. Super simple, like a really approachable narrative. From a structural viewpoint and just from a personal audience viewpoint, this is a great entry movie to the genre. Like this gives you everything you need in a real clean, very followable package. It's a really direct, simple narrative. There's not a lot of branching paths, not a whole bunch of characters to worry about. And it gives you a really good emotional payoff. So like there's not a lot of it does not subvert your expectations. It's a good way to build your expectations though. And as a family man, I didn't realize this, but you can watch this with your kids if they're of an appropriate age and you're able to watch it with them. There's a little bit of violence in it, but like frankly, it's all stylized, and like the central moral of the movie of practicing hard and being polite and doing the right thing and being rewarding for it is something that's kind of a decent thing to teach kids. So my kids were watching it with me, and they were really interested in the training scenes. So another interesting part of my reaction to it is that like this is something I can actually share with the people that I live with, my kids and my wife. So that was fun.
And again, this is Lau Kai-Leung is I think a good choice for family film. Like we did My Young Auntie, which I think would also probably be appropriate for kids.
Oh yeah, I think if it had a musical sequence, my wife would love that. She's a big musical fan.
And his movies just tend to have a good general appeal. And I think another thing about this film is, like you said, it's a very simple plot, but most of it is really centered around that Shaolin period where he's training at Shaolin. And so it's like you have this beginning part that sort of gets into the rebellion and how he gets drawn into it and becomes a messenger, and then the tragedy unfolds. And you have the end part where he actually gets his revenge. But the bulk of the film, it's like it's sort of similar to Gordon Liu's role in 8 Diagram Pole Fighter, but it's much more. It's like a real deep dive into that sort of Shaolin experience and the training. And I think the way I appreciate this movie is it just really kind of gets at the heart of what martial arts are all about and what martial arts training means. And I think that's why it resonates with so many people. It's certainly not my favorite Lau Kai-Leung movie. Like it's a lot of people really like this film, and as Joel pointed out, there's all kinds of reasons to really like it. But I have to admit, just to be fully honest here, when I sit down to watch this film, I'm always just a little bit reluctant because I know I'm in for kind of a long experience, and I don't pop it into the DVD player as easily as say 8 Diagram Pole Fighter or My Young Auntie. But it's still a really good movie. It's not that it's bad. It's just that it's not one of these ones that I want to watch all the time for some reason.
Yeah, it's a really good way of summarizing it too, because like this would not be like in the hot seat for next DVD I watch because like, and I think it's just because it is about training. It is about like you as an audience member persevere along with the character, and that's an immersive experience. But it's not quite as watchable as just like skipping ahead to the part where he's doing stuff and there's action and fighting and such like.
No, I would agree with that. But when I'm actually sitting down and watching it, I find myself really appreciating those sequences, and I think that
it had a real Rocky vibe, didn't it?
What was that?
It had a real Rocky vibe, didn't it?
I think it did. But here's the funny thing: Rocky, I watch over and over and over and over and over again. And I think it has a Rocky vibe, but I do have to say it's totally different from Rocky. Rocky is a different kind of movie.
Quick cuts in the training sequence. This didn't have that. Like each training sequence was its own whole scene So like every element really got like you really had to sit there with him.
They were clever in how they edited it because you do see, there are jumps in time in the training scenes, but it feels like a scene. It doesn't feel like in a Rocky movie where it's like a rapid sequence of they kind of blaze through 8 months. Though honestly they did do that here. This was like 7 years of training, and it was all handled in that chunk of the movie. So they did do a lot of time elapsing. It's just that I feel like, in a way, it was almost more clever than Rocky because it wove it together in a way that felt a bit more natural. Whereas the Rocky montages, they feel like music videos or like they feel like a deliberate moment in the film. I didn't feel deliberately put into a montage during this, but it was kind of a montage. Do you know what I mean? It was sort of. It was
a longer period of time, so it was kind of like a slowed down montage almost. Yeah. Like the whole middle of the movie was one big montage. But you're right; they didn't have that kind of a theater that the Rocky one had.
Yeah.
And so you really feel the passage of time and the impact on the characters.
Yeah.
And like his relationship with his teachers and the way he impresses some and such.
I really like that aspect of the movie, by the way. I love how you can tell even if it's just like a brief scene with the teacher sort of nodding or looking at you, get a complete sense of what his relationship with that master is.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And I think that's a really important part of any kind of tutelage, not just martial arts, but if you're learning music or anything, that teacher-student relationship is essential. And I like that. I feel when I'm watching what I feel about this movie is it feels like it really is coming from Lau Kai-Leung's martial arts experience. Do you know what I mean? And it's almost sort of like a martial arts movie for martial arts practitioners. So and again, that tends to be the level that I find myself enjoying the film on. Is it sort of gets at the heart of the perseverance aspect. And just like if we just want to talk about some of these training sequences, what they fundamentally boil down to is he's put into a really challenging situation in each one, and just basically told, just do this, just do it until you get it right. Like just keep doing it, and it might take you 6 months, it might take you 5 years, it might take you the rest of your life. Just keep doing it until you've perfected this, and then you can move on to the next chamber, basically. And it's a really interesting setup. And again, I mean, if you take martial arts, they're generally not going to have you, move from, one chamber to the next chamber, like it does in this movie. But it represents that sort of like, okay, now I'm going to teach you this kick, and you need to practice this kick 100 times a day, like just 1,000 times a day if you need to. Just keep practicing it however many times you need to until you can do it properly. And
yeah, that is a very specifically Chinese martial art thing too. Like because thinking about my knowledge of martial arts, like Hung Gar Kwan is one of the ones that really struck me when I first started learning like culturally different styles there were like you're supposed to get into like this deep horse stance for 3 hours and practice punching every single day. Tai Chi Chuan is like that too. Every single morning, there's a famous master, like a modern master in China, and every single morning you are expected to go and attend his morning Tai Chi Chuan session without speaking to anyone. Just copy their motions. And after 7 years of that, you are allowed to proceed to the next stage of his training where you're actually able to attempt to like affect the guy. There's an urban legend that it's really difficult to like bump him or throw him over because he's got some kind of internal mastery of chi. Probably the reason he's hard to affect or bump over is because he's been doing deep horse stances for an hour or 2 hours every single morning for the last 50 years. But whatever. So that's a very culturally Chinese aspect of martial training is like, okay, we're going to do this until you get it correct. I don't care how many years that takes.
But I think it's also fun. I think it's a fundamental trait of most martial arts. Not. I mean, obviously, there's certain key aspects here that aren't. But just that basic idea of, you need to you sit there and you master the technique. It's like a craft. Do you know what I mean? And it's all built around the notion that the human body is capable of adapting, and that if you expose yourself to this challenge long enough and you have sufficient will, which I think they may have made a point of calling that out. I think he said it's a matter of will. You can eventually just kind of figure it out and do it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a like I had that experience in every martial art I did, where not all of them will have the thing where you have to do this one thing forever until you get it right and then move to the next stage. But they all have that. Okay, today you're going to do horse stance for 45 minutes, and you're just going to learn how to do horse stance for 45 minutes. When I did Taekwondo, you have to kick really high. It's really difficult to do like a spinning hook kick. If you've never stretched in your life, and you got to get that thing where your foot is like, it's like your bottom foot and your top foot are like a pole going up into the air. Do you know what I mean? And so they would put you against the wall, and you'd spend the whole class doing this. You would just get they would slowly walk over to each student and spread their legs further and further and further until they were capable of doing a full split. And there would be entire classes of that. And so I think it's that, I guess you would call it like extreme dedication to just one skill. Do you know what I mean? Like that seemed to be what was going on in a lot of these chambers to me.
Yeah. Oh, very much. Actually, before the show started, speaking of chambers, there's one that I really enjoyed, which was the head smashing chamber. So you wanted to say something about that scene?
So number one, we know a lot more about head injuries now, and I was just thinking about, that's the one, like it's true. Like if you like, for example, I remember when I first shifted from Taekwondo to Muay Thai, one of the trainers used to always say to us, like and this was back when like Far Eastern, East Asian martial arts had considerably more appeal to people just because they were in media more, and Western styles were not as thought highly of. And I know a lot of that has changed since, but this is the time that this all occurred. He was saying, a lot of people think like karate, and the guy came from a karate background. He was saying everybody, would pick the karate guy over the boxer because karate has so many different little moves, and a boxer has maybe a smaller toolbox, but within that toolbox there's so much nuance and finesse and effort. And then this was just this guy said. I'm not saying that this is 100% true in all cases, but he was sort of going against sort of what was prevailing logic at the time. He was saying, I would pick the boxer every time in a fight because the boxer's been practiced at getting his head hit over and over and over and over again. And he kind of said this knowing we were about to take Muay Thai, where we're going to be getting our heads hit, pretty frequently. And so I think that exercise was interesting to me because it was kind of a good, like, that's what happens in a fight. You get hit in the head, and so it makes sense that they would get conditioned to be hit in the head. On the other hand, they were doing it to such a degree that it was like in the movie, it was clear they all had concussions by the end of that line, and then they would just go back and do it again and again and again and again and so I'm just I was just sort of wondering how many of them die from the head injuries,
from the head trauma. Yeah.
I mean, again, it was a movie, so you got to take it as a movie, not as
Yeah, there's an element of fantasy to it, which I think is important because the movie actually conveys that element of fantasy very well, and a very key scene they don't revisit, which is he jumps to the highest chamber when he learns that there's a certain number of them. Goes to the last one, and they're all sitting there. I guess they're reading the I Ching or something, and they're just like quoting from Buddhist scripture and things like that. And that's all that's happening in this chamber. This
the 35th chamber scene?
Yeah. And he walks in and he's like, so it's, this isn't training, this isn't a big deal. And they use some kind of highly cultivated chi magic to throw him out.
Yep. And he never masters that chamber, right? Even by the end of the movie.
They never have him go back there.
Yeah. That's another cool thing about this film. He doesn't become like the number one head abbot. I mean, it's based on a legendary, figure too, so they're it's not like they can just do everything they want, but I like that he isn't necessarily going to the top of Shaolin. He's becoming the guy who spreads Shaolin to the lay people and starts transitioning to having lay disciples and things like that, which is a staple of a lot of the great martial arts movies. So it's it's kind of cool in that you also sort of like are anticipating the end path of the character too throughout the training once you realize where it's going. But I really do like that he goes in there and that's a chamber he never masters, and it seems like all you really are supposed to need to do to master it is to understand the scriptures enough, right? Because he's asking him how many times he's read the sutras, and so it seems like that's the chamber where you need to be like enlightened or have some higher level of awareness.
That's some kind of mystical cultivation of chi, which I mean that's part of the mythology of martial arts, which is one of the things that I find really fascinating and appealing. Which is, but I like that the movie does that early on. It's the first thing he does, and it doesn't go back to it because it very clearly communicates to you, hey, look, there's a fantasy element to this that we're not going to explore fully, and that's okay. You can just realize that there's some element of fantasy to this. It's really, really clean, clear, well-constructed communication that is perfectly communicated even to a Western audience. And one of the reasons I would recommend this for someone as their first wuxia movie, just because it conforms a lot to your expectations as a Western viewer. Like, you're not challenged with a B plot and a C plot. You don't see the 4-act structure that we've seen in a lot of movies. A lot of the Zhang stuff, which has a lot of different factions and clans, doesn't come into it and complicate it. It's all very straightforward.
Yep.
So it's a real good entry-level movie.
Yeah, no, I think so. And it's also, I think it's a movie that, if you haven't seen it and you've been watching these kind of movies for a while, you should watch. It's definitely something that, like, if only to understand, Gordon Liu's place and Lau Kai-Leung's place in the genre. But and also it'll probably, if you're like a Wu-Tang Clan fan or something, you probably want to see this.
I actually got into Wu-Tang Clan just around the time that I started watching this movie, because I'm like, oh hey, that's a Wu-Tang Clan album. I should listen to that. And like, you can really not to like make this a tangent about the Wu-Tang Clan, but like that was like their intro album, and you can see why they got popular. They're really good.
Yeah, I remember when I think it was Ong Bak. When I got Ong Bak on DVD when that first came out.
Ong Bak, the Protector.
Yeah, not the Protector, the original Ong Bak.
The first one before the Protector. So where's my elephants?
So the Protector is Tum Yum Goong, and Tum Yum Goong is the version we got, the Protector. They changed so much. I don't know if they've rectified that. But if just for people listening, if you are going to get into Tony Jaa, get Tum Yum Goong. Don't get the American release version of Tum Yum Goong, the Protector, unless it's like the full version, because the villain in that movie, they completely change a really crucial aspect of it, simply because I think they thought Americans wouldn't understand it. But it's really not that difficult to wrap your head around.
Like, Americans didn't understand that one anyway. Like, let me give you a brief synopsis of Ong Bak the Protector. You're an Australian organized crime dude. You're sitting there playing poker with your friends. This Thai guy smashes through the concrete like the Kool-Aid Man, shouting, "Where's my elephants?" You don't know what's going on. You pull a chain. Goons come out of everywhere. Rollerblades and four-wheelers and rocket bikes to fight this guy. No one can stop them. That's every scene in this movie.
We should do some Thai stuff, I think. I think it wouldn't be, I mean, I know it's not wuxia, but I would like
It is entertaining, but it's very peculiar. Well, I had a very strange impression of Ong Bak the Protector, so.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. But
not to put us on another path, but
no. But all I was going to say is the Wu-Tang Clan were on the DVD when it came out. I remember them having an introduction of some kind, and I think the purpose that they served, I'm pretty sure it was the Wu-Tang Clan. It was ages ago. It was like 2005 or whatever it was. And it might have been Tum Yum Goong. It might not have been Ong Bak. But whatever one it was, I think their function was to help explain what Muay Thai was and give it some amount of credibility to the audience, because it was, it was becoming known because of the UFC, but it still wasn't quite in the mainstream, I think. Again, it's worth seeing just for reasons like that, just so you can connect it to other cultural, pop culture details and that sort of thing. But but yeah, I think to me, the two themes that really sort of jump out at me are the one that we've already discussed, which is sort of like perseverance, martial arts, sort of training, and how it's about like in the log scene where they have to jump across the water, and it seems impossible, but if you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it, you eventually understand, how to make your body move so that it crosses that log. And again, that also kind of gets into sort of lightness kung fu stuff too, which is another wuxia element. But the other theme that I think the film addresses is sort of the tension between the Buddhist sort of non-violence and the violence of martial arts, and how those two things kind of meet in Shaolin. And that always seems to be like one of the central conflicts for in a Shaolin movie. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Oh man, yeah, it's always an interesting theme to explore too, because Buddhism is very, very much like pacifism, vegetarian, don't harm any life, all life is sacred and can be replaced. And any time that you you contrast that level of commitment to non-violence with the best ability to commit violence, I mean, like, it's easy to milk that cow, Like, that's when you always get drama out of it. You always get, like, really rich character moments. Because what happens is the character found between those extremes, and there's almost always a huge necessity for that violence, but found between those extremes, they are the ones that have to define themselves and what those extremes mean in terms of their own life and their own destiny. Always great stuff.
Well, and I think it's a really essential human question. It's not just about martial arts. Like there's a line at the start of the movie where I think his friend who dies says, "I should have learned kung fu instead of ethics," because they were students, and it's interesting to me because Gordon Liu's character demonstrates a really profound understanding of ethics when he actually goes to get his revenge. He's not just sort of unhinged. Do you know what I mean? He's not just, he's not like the guy in, say, 8-Diagram Pole Fighter who maybe was, when he goes to that Shaolin temple, he's tearing it up. He's just this maniac who, is just on a his only goal is revenge. The character in this movie has, he develops an understanding of Buddhism enough that he's able to put a Buddhist context into some of his violence. Do you know what I mean? And he's able to sort of have an ethical structure that he's operating inside of with the violence. Which again, I think, if you're, anything that sort of enhances your power in any way, sort of brings ethical questions into it. So I think that it's one of the reasons why you would you sort of have this as a in any martial art, but it's just sort of particularly pronounced when it's Buddhist Shaolin, learning how to hurt people, but also trying to be monks. That
and that's another thing that's interesting about, like, when I was talking about earlier, where the characters have to define themselves in terms of those extremes. One of his teachers, when he has to develop the three, what do you call that, the little chain stick things?
The 3-section staff.
Yeah, 3-section staff. I cannot call that to my mind at all. He has to develop a new weapon entirely to take this guy on. But that guy clearly loves practicing martial arts and fighting and competing. Like, you can tell just the joy he has in it, how much satisfaction he takes from having a worthy student.
Well, what I liked about that character, and I think that was played by Lee Hoi-sung.
Really well portrayed, by the way. I like the character a lot.
At first, he seemed like an antagonist. You know what I mean? You thought, like, oh, he's going to be the one who's thwarting him and trying to get him booted out of Shaolin the whole time or whatever. But
yeah,
actually,
you get that vibe early on.
Yeah, but actually, he's the one who I think maybe has the most admiration for him and doesn't want him to have this easy path to the end, because then he won't be as well shaped by the training. Do you know what I mean? Because remember, they give him all these promotions, and at the final promotion, he's like, "Look, we've given him all these promotions. I think we need to make things a little bit difficult here and test him out a bit. And so let him fight me, and if he can beat me, give him the promotion. But I don't." And at first, it seems like, oh man, he's like he just doesn't want him to advance, but no, he just wants him to be worthy for the post that he's going to get.
Yeah, and it's wonderfully nuanced. It really is, and this is a movie that, even though it's straightforward, there is a richness to every single element in it that really does make it a satisfying watch. And it makes it immersive, because you don't really realize that you're enjoying that nuance on as many levels as you are.
Yeah.
That you are. And you're watching it, you're like, oh, what's this guy up to? What's he doing now? What's going on in this chamber?
So,
and everything has such a richness to it. So it is more straightforward in some ways, but in other ways, it doesn't really sacrifice its complexity for that. It just makes it more palatable, more immediate, and more. You almost consume those dimensions of complexity subconsciously.
What I like about it too is it's all set kind of in one location, and that's either a good or a bad thing in a movie. I think in a Lau Kai-Leung film, it's either a good or a bad thing. But he's very good at just hunkering down in one spot. So we're going to have this movie take place at Shaolin, and that's where all the action is, and it gives everything a real sense of location, of provided the work in the movie is done to create an actual system, like an actual place that has people in it, and it has a like you feel like you push that wall, and behind the wall there'll be people there. As long as it does all that, it works. When that isn't done, then it can kind of start to feel lonely and fake. But I think he's very good at giving a location a sense of the people who inhabit it, and sort of exploiting it for the purposes of telling a story.
There's another, and speaking of that, there's a really brilliant way that it sits in the movie, because we don't start there, we go there, and it's its own extraordinarily well-developed living world. Then we leave there for the end of the movie. So it really does feel like you're going to a very particular place and going through this journey with the character, greatly enhancing the sense of that sense of place and that sense of culture and the living dynamic environment.
Yeah, it's not just I'm passing through. It's not we're just going there for the final battle. You're going there, and the heart of the movie is the experience at Shaolin, and everything else kind of takes place at the bookends of it. So it's I think you're right about that. But we probably should get into the gaming question too. Which again,
on this long about the movie, it really is a good movie.
It is a good movie, and I know I said at the beginning that I'm not super excited to watch it all the time, but that's not necessarily. I feel the same way about A Touch of Zen. A Touch of Zen is a great film, but I wouldn't pop it in my DVD player all the time. Do you know what I mean? Because
there are a lot of great movies that I wouldn't pop in all the time. I mean, because I'll watch John Carpenter's The Thing for the 1 billionth time before I watch Godfather again, even though Godfather is clearly the better movie. Just because it's so heavy and there's so much stuff to digest with Godfather.
Godfather's good. I always preferred Goodfellas. Goodfellas I can watch anytime.
Yeah, Goodfellas is very watchable.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think Goodfellas is a better movie than Godfather. I like Godfather.
Blasphemy.
Huh? No, it's not blasphemy at all. Godfather. I don't want to get too deep into another topic.
We'll fight about this later.
But the Godfather is kind of boring. Number one. And I know that part of that is it's an earlier movie, so obviously the pacing is different, but I just don't think it's as Goodfellas set the moment I saw Goodfellas the very first time, it set off something in my brain that was like gunpowder going off. Do you know what I mean? I just you see that scene where he's like, my whole life I wanted to be a gangster. You know what I mean? Like right after when they I think the movie opens with them in the car, and then they have it, and then he sort of leads into his background from there. So it kind of opens in the middle, and then it starts at his childhood. It is
autobiographical, whereas Godfather is not. As I recall, Godfather was purely a work of fiction, whereas Goodfellas is
and actually I would say this: Godfather, I think, the book is really good. I really like the book, and I really do like the movie. It's just that I feel like the movie is it just doesn't feel as real as Goodfellas does. Goodfellas gets into Godfather feels like it's got like a window into that world, but they're kind of making a lot of stuff up. And Goodfellas feels like they know exactly like this is like the inner workings of the mafia. Not only is it just sort of like a tour of what's going on, the story is amazing. The story is really brilliantly told, and again, I don't want to get in a sidetrack, but I
will say again, Goodfellas is much more watchable than The Godfather.
And so, but to your point, yes, I think you're right. Like, it can still be a good movie or a great movie. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's you're going to want to watch it every day. Some movies, they have to, especially if they're trying to make a point, they'll be somewhat of a slog. And you kind of have to be in the right mindset to enjoy that slog.
You don't always want a banquet. Sometimes you just want to go and get something delicious right now. Yeah. Go get a yummy Arby's burger or something like that. You don't necessarily want to sit down to a full, 3-course meal banquet thing. It's better. You're just not in the mood. It's fine.
But in terms of the gaming, I think the only way I can think to approach this movie is, how you might connect it to the idea of advancement and learning martial arts techniques. And, obviously one of the cool things about 36 Chamber is you could easily connect that concept to levels. Do you know what I mean? That's a really easy thing to do in a game. You could make a game that has 36 levels, and each level is and for the Shaolin class, each level would be the chamber. I'm sure somebody's probably done that somewhere.
I don't know if they have, because that's a cool idea. We may have to be the ones to do that.
I'm sure somebody's done it. It must have been done, but that would be. That's the obvious way to do it.
True. I will say that a lot of that kind of mirrors the way I think about levels too. A thing that is really important about doing it that way is that before you start, when you're on Chamber 0, effectively, when you're just a normal dude, there needs to be a playable game there mechanic-wise, so a normal person has stats before you start layering on the levels. That's not obvious if you're starting a game from scratch. I think a lot of people begin with the assumption that level 1 characters are already so divorced from how people work that you don't really need to stat people. And I think that makes a poor game, because it means you can't fill out your roster of the rest of the world with normal people. It's all exceptional people, and that kind of skews the way we interact.
It depends how you do it, because you could have monster entries that include normal people that are not leveled.
Yeah, and that's exactly how Dungeons & Dragons does it. But I never realized the genius of that until I went to start designing my own games. Because you don't think about it. Because you don't go to D&D to play a normal person or to interact with them. You go into a dungeon and fight monsters.
I think in 3E, didn't they have 0 level as a weren't there 0 level characters in that? Or
in 3rd? I don't remember 0 level characters. I know that there were...
I know there were NPC classes at least.
There were NPC classes, which is distinct from it being a 0 level character, because they leveled up the same way. 3 and 5 had a lot of weird stuff with, you had to fight. That was exclusively you got XP. So if you wanted to have higher level NPC classes, they had to be on a border town where they were likely to have fought monsters. And that is not the way human beings work in real life, really. Because again, this movie's a good example of that. He never fought a monster. He got his ass kicked and then went to train for years and years. He didn't get XP from going into dungeons and getting gold. He didn't get XP from killing monsters. He got techniques by taking the time and putting the effort to train for them.
And that's what I'm getting at. That's something that comes up a lot when I would run a lot of my Wuxia campaigns is people would try to do that. They'd say, well, I'm going to go to whatever the setting's equivalent of Wudang is or Shaolin, and I'm going to try to train with them. And then what does the GM sort of do in those circumstances? Because a lot of times the system might not, usually a game will have a particular XP system to it. And increasingly, the more I game, the longer I've been doing this, the more I just think XP systems are better when they're looser and that the GM has the ability to kind of adapt them, because sometimes that might be true. Sometimes you might have a good guideline. Okay, if they beat X number of guys, they get X XP or whatever the guideline is. And for most campaigns, that'll be fine. You go into the dungeon or you go exploring, you fight monsters, you fight the bandits or whatever they are, and you get the XP. Or you get it for various other things that are on the list. It's not always about combat, but the training thing is always kind of hard, because it's naturally it naturally leans towards elapsing time, so it can also sort of be perceived as a cheat. But I feel like it's not necessarily bad if a player wants to go and train at, say, Shaolin, you know, as long as the other players aren't getting shafted by it. Like, as long as you're not going there and then you elapse time 6 months and suddenly this one character is like level 9 and everybody else is still level 3 or whatever. As long as you account for that time with the other characters, then I think it's okay.
You do that no matter if you're in the dungeon going round by round, in combat going round by round, or in montage time and going month by month. Everyone gets their turn. Everyone gets their slice of the pie. It's a group activity, so you have to more or less equalize that kind of share of the spotlight and reward.
But also, I think that you could. It depends on how you want it. It really does depend on the system, because like in Ogre Gate, I could separate advancement and techniques as well. So that was also another lever I had to pull, where the character might not necessarily go up in level, but they might gain techniques, and so that's a little bit easier to manage, because then you can just say, well, all right, you train with this guy for 6 months and you get the technique, whatever optional method I decided to use that day. But also I think here it's a little bit different, because one of the things that I realized watching the movie is not every character comes out of that training process the same. Do you know what I mean? Like, he came out of those training processes head and shoulders above the other guys for some reason, right? And
they never really give you an idea of why exactly.
Well, I think it was because of his willfulness. I think that's why they said it's a matter of will, and he was the one with the most will to sort of get through this training, and he had that definitive goal of revenge, and the other characters were more interested in being good monks. Do you know what I mean? They didn't necessarily have the ambition that he had. But I'm just wondering if there'd be a way to, like, okay, say you have that chamber where they're walking over the water on the logs, and for the sake of argument, we'll say what the character's got to learn is lightness kung fu, or some kind of lightness kung fu ability or style, or something related to lightness kung fu. Would there be various outcomes that chamber could produce? Do you know what I'm saying? So it's not just, you go through the chamber and you get, I don't know, a pip in lightness kung fu, or you get this lightness kung fu ability, or I advance you in level, and again, it's going to depend greatly on the game, but whatever it is, it would need to. Go ahead.
I had some thinking, Artie, that you could do it kind of like Burning Wheel does, where in Burning Wheel you take your different skills, and whenever you test them, you advance them by testing them. Yep. So you could do it in that scenario. And in Burning Wheel, unfortunately, it's a little bit cumbersome, because every single time you roll, you test them, and you have to record it.
Yep.
But you could say that only happens during training scenes. If you were going to take that chunk from Burning Wheel, say, okay, how do you want to approach this puzzle that they put in front of you? And depending on how you approached it would depend on which things got more powerful and which techniques you then unlocked.
Yep. Okay.
You do it that way.
No, that's not a bad way. I mean, there are a lot of games that have things like, you train up individual abilities and things like that. So I think I guess what I'm thinking is, and this is sort of running counter to some of the things that I'm sort of working on at the moment, but I feel like just increasingly I would like to see, I almost want to see like a totally free form kung fu wuxia game. Do you know what I mean? Where the player says, okay, I go, like you have these things that exist, right? You have these things that exist out in the world. Like, you have Shaolin and they have their abilities. But I feel like there should be like a general mechanical shape of what it means to have all of the various Shaolin abilities. And the GM extracts from that and says, okay, this is what you've acquired from your training because you did this exercise and that exercise and you mastered this one. Do you know what I mean? Like a very customized, this is the Shaolin practitioner you become by the end of the journey. Because not everybody who goes through that training is coming out the same.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's interesting about certain media, where you'll have characters undergo the same training, same technique, same master, and they'll be very different at the end. They'll emphasize things that work with them strategically and fit their personality, and it's there's no immediately intuitive way for me to do that mechanically.
Well, I mean,
I think the way you're talking about doing it's probably the best way.
Well, you can shift it to attributes, or you can do it with, like, if you're doing, like, a game like 3E, you could have used feats or something, or there are all kinds of like little tools you could use. I just kind of but I kind of want to have something where I feel like it's more free form. Do you know what I mean?
You almost want like a superhero system, like Champions, where you can build powers.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, because, like, it comes up all the time. Whenever, like, 99% of the time, you're running a Wuxia game in, like, a sort of typical structure. Like Ogre Gate's a pretty typical structure, and it worked fine. But every once in a while, you get a guy who had, like, it wasn't just that they were trying to be like like, ooh, this is my special character, and I want everybody to pay attention to my special character.
Yeah, I think what we call it darling.
Yeah. Sometimes you get guys that have, like, no, I have this really specific concept that's totally in line with Wuxia. Like, it's like ripped right out of the pages of Common. But the system won't allow it to happen because the system is chained by either balance considerations or various other things. And I feel like if I had just kind of taken the step as a GM to say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take what I can from the system to allow that to happen, and I'm going to impose whatever downsides I feel will help balance it out, maybe. It would have worked better than if I had just tried to do it by the book. Do you know what I'm saying? When I try to do it by the book, that's kind of when I read.
By the book, what you do is you get an imperfect fit for that, its nearest equivalent technique or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're right, that's not as satisfying, because that first of all, that's not what happens in the genre fiction at all, ever. They always make something unique, because it's a storytelling thing, so the unique thing is what stands out and it's what you want in the story.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel right. Like, it doesn't feel right to the player, it feels like they got shortchanged. Doesn't feel right to you as a GM because your game isn't as much as it could be. Yeah, it doesn't feel right.
And I mean, and again, you can go off the rails because I think you can also run into the issue of it's in the fiction, but like, and it's in the genre, but do you really want to go there just because of the complications of bringing it into a game? But sometimes it feels like I really, this is a movie I'd really like to game. Do you know what I mean? It's not like a. I don't think it would be an impossible campaign. Do you know what I mean? A campaign where the players, and again, it might have to arise naturally. It might have to be something that everybody agrees on beforehand. I don't know. It depends on your group. But like some big tragedy happens and the players decide to go and find and master skills from one of the big sects in the setting. And they go and do that, and then they return to contend with the people who were the source of the tragedy. That... Again, I mean, I could do that easily in some of the systems I use and have made, but I'd really be curious if I could do it free form. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of like I feel like that would be very satisfying.
It would be like it's difficult though, because when it comes to kung fu, like, you want to have highly developed techniques that have a sense of character.
Yeah.
And that's at odds with doing it completely freeform.
Well, and that's why I'm saying Shaolin would have a mechanical shape already that exists. Like, you'd say, like, okay.
Seems what you want is, like, breaking that down one more degree, what you'd want is a Champions-esque list of very small knobs and levers for powers. And then you'd want to develop entire, like, completely developed styles out of those. So whenever you go to Shaolin, you can learn, like the iron punch fist or whatever, and your version of that can have the knobs twisted a little bit. Or maybe you learn falling crane kick, and the knobs are twisted a little bit.
Oh, I feel like I want to do the opposite. I want to build, like, the head abbot. I want to make that head abbot, and then have all of, like this is what he can do. Like, I make, like, a 36 level character, or whatever the system, requires here. And then It's just a matter of dispensing whatever abilities that 36 level character is willing to dispense to people, and that they're able to master.
That's how it works in my game, where like I make the complete martial art and what a grandmaster would do, and then I just break that up into discrete techniques and tiers for a style.
Okay.
And
Yeah, so that
the way it works is.
So what that tells me is we should try to run your game as a 36 chamber campaign and see how that goes.
It actually probably go pretty well.
Do you think you could do a 36 chamber scenario? Would you be comfortable doing like a
I would, even though there's not a lot of fighting in it, because like one of the XP mechanisms in my game is following your destiny, and because the scenes in which he's training aren't just like montage scenes, they're actual like things that are done in real time. The things he does and the people he interacts with, every time he does something, he has the chance to negotiate for getting one of those XP triggers. And so he could actually be earning XP while training, and then go into the montage of, okay, so that's your introduction to this. Let's skip ahead, 3 months, and you have another scene, and you skip ahead a few months. At the end of that, all that training, you can spend the accumulated XP on getting the technique it was trying to train you for. So you actually could do 36 chambers in my game with no changes.
Okay.
I just impressed myself. Holy hell. You could do 36 chambers in my game with no changes. Wow. I must have done a really good job.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. When I was trying to think about it for Ogre Gate, it wouldn't work, because for Ogre Gate, you would need to have 36 techniques for that conceit to make sense. And 36 techniques, like the game already has too many techniques in terms of, how many, like, you're walking around with 13 techniques or something. What was that?
You never have too many techniques in a kung fu game. Blasphemy.
No, but you know what I'm saying. There's an overabundance of techniques, and
I think there's a rich library of techniques. Like, I've got the Ogre Gate
book. That's the marketing expert in you speaking. That's
no, dude. It's that is the consumer in me speaking. Because like I bought your game because I was like, I've known Brian for a while. He's clearly a smart designer. He loves Wuxia. This game is going to be rad. So I bought it, and then like I'm looking through it, and I'm like, this is technical. There's a review of it online where they're like, this is on a beginner's RPG. Yes, true. However, I got to that section on techniques, and I was like, yes, it keeps going. Ugh.
Yeah, there's a lot
in there. That's what I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted. That's what I wanted out of your game.
But my point still stands. I wouldn't be able to do 36 chamber because I would need, at least not like as you said, like unchanged. I wouldn't be able to do it because I would need 36 techniques for that to even make sense for the Shaolin sect to have. And there is a Shaolin sect in there. They're the Sun Mai sect, but
yeah, my techniques are really dense. Like I'll have 10 to a style, so like I couldn't do 36 distinct techniques either.
Okay.
I'd have to radically alter the way you level up to do that. So that's okay. On that level, no. I could do what we saw in the movie with my game, where he gets like 4 or 5 techniques, and he's a higher level master. Okay. I could do that.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I don't
have 36 distinct because like
and that's important. We don't actually see all 36 chambers. We don't actually see all of them. So it's
we see the last one, which is one distinct technique, and we see the ones he goes through, which I guess he only goes through like 5 or 6, doesn't he?
I don't remember the exact number. He goes through so there's a bunch of cool ones. He's got the one where he has to carry the buckets of water. That yes. I think that was the scene that they're calling back to in Kill Bill, by the way, when she carries the water.
Oh yeah.
But that one was good, and I appreciate that scene because those muscles that you're like when you're lifting something, the shoulder muscles up there, those are ones that you really do have to develop for any martial art where you're punching or you're holding things, So I thought that was cool. I did wonder about the knives they had on his armpits and how, like, were those just meant to sting or were those meant to actually harm? Like, would you die if you lowered the buckets?
I don't know.
But there was
they were
that
meant to sting, but they were pretty long, weren't they?
There was that one. There was the head sandbag one where they were banging their heads into the sandbag. There was the water.
Remember the bell?
The bell was that's a really good one too, because that one, it was all about the power in the wrist, and that one is the one that looked the most agonizing to me.
It did look agonizing.
Yeah. That one. Oh, sorry. I apologize. My medication alarm went off. I'm now an hour overdue for my medicine.
We've been talking for a while.
Yeah.
It's been a really good conversation.
Being the old man that I am becoming. But no, that one looked the most grueling, and I certainly would that like I could feel his pain in that scene.
Yeah.
I
feel
that
like conveys the suffering really well.
Which ones am I forgetting? I know there had to be more, unless I'm.
Oh no, there's the one with the mirrors.
Where he's doing the, and that's an iconic scene where he's like his eyes are going back and forth with the light, and he's got the two incense burners over his next to his ears. That was an intense scene. And I like the master in that one.
Yeah, because he's got this like joie de vivre about the whole thing, like, oh, don't turn your head. So he's a fun little guy.
And then the one that leads to the development of the trisection staff, which I thought that was cool how they did that, where he discovers it by slicing up the bamboo and it becomes like a prototype for his 3-section staff. That was cool. That reminded me, there's a movie called Shaolin Mantis where the guy develops Mantis style, and it's a similar type happy coincidence where he falls down and he sees a mantis and he just happens to notice, its movements, and or it has a eureka moment.
Well, that eureka moment is really, that's like kind of the monomyth of how martial arts get made, because like the guy who developed Tai Chi Chuan did that too, where like monkey style, same thing. So like a lot of times I was this martial arts guy, then I got my butt kicked, and then I saw a monkey. It's always something like that, and then I saw a snake and a hawk fighting, and I was like, aha!
A lot of them have that. I know in Taekwondo, the story we used to hear, I don't think this is true, but what they used to always tell us was that it was originally developed to knock people off their horses. So like the jumping sidekick was supposedly for dismounting horsemen or something. But which that sounds like a very suspicious historical tale to me, but it's a really cool origin myth for a martial style. But anyways, because I think when you look at the real history, I think it was more like a more recent invention.
A lot of martial arts are a little more recent than they want to tell you about.
But also it gets complicated, because you can say, well, this, like as we know it, was made by this guy right here, but he was basing it off of X, which goes back further and further. And
that's the thing. There's a lot of uncredited origins to history. That's not just a martial arts thing. That's just all throughout history. There's a lot of uncredited origins to things, like and there's some that are documented and not credited. And again, not to get super deep into this, but Richard Cantillon, one of the guys that I really like and admire in economic thought, wrote years and years before Adam Smith did, and Smith is always mentioned in all of my economics textbooks, and they never breathe a word about Cantillon, despite the fact that everything he says was later aped like one for one by Smith and not really advanced on at all. So like Adam Smith gets a lot of credit for being the guy that was like, oh, this guy really invented economics. Not really. Richard Cantillon got rich on the Louisiana Purchase because he was a forerunner to that exact same kind of thought. It happens. It's weird, but it happens.
So, but yeah. So how about we do this? Why don't we try doing a Shaolin campaign with your game? Do you think that would be, unless it's a bad use of time? Style. I don't want to push you to do something that's going to take away from whatever you're working on.
And we'd have to co-develop it, because like I don't know enough about the Shaolin techniques to make one style, because the way I approach styles is as a complete tactical approach to the same combat system. And right now, the 7 most modern ones I made for Lone Wolf Fist all have a real, like, first of all, they're overtly very mystical, and second of all, like, they all have a very particular, like, here is our tactical, like, here's our tactical rock. This one's more defensive. This one's faster. This one's got, like, an alpha strike thing going on. This one's more about building up power slowly. This is about disrupting the opponent. So I need to put my head together with you and see, like, okay, well, what is Shaolin about as far as strategy-wise? And again, I don't know that I do justice to the techniques, because the techniques in this movie are all very much like your head will get stronger, which is a little more holistic than having the head-smashing kung fu technique that's able to hit your head through concrete, which is what the equivalent would be in my game.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Well, I think well, how about this? We'll talk about it because maybe we'll take.
This is an intriguing idea, so I do want to check it out.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. My wife has just awakened, and that means that the conversation is going to have to come to an end. But either way, I think we had a pretty good discussion on 36 Chamber, and we'll and I do want to follow up on that. We I don't always have the best track record of following up on these side topics, but I think that'll be a good one. And coming up soon, we're going to be doing Chinese Ghost Story. Once that, basically, it's a matter of a Blu-ray arriving in the mail that was promised months ago and hasn't come for some mysterious reason.
Yeah, it really disrupted our review schedule. That was going to be like an October thing or something. So
yeah, I ordered a Blu-ray from Amazon to get to Joel, and it was supposed to come, I think, when? In December? Like, it was like December 11th?
December was the first quote, and it's almost February.
Yeah.
And, like, we've still not... It's still not arrived even at your place. So.
And I was tracking the package, and it did that thing where it's like, oh, it's out on delivery and will arrive by 8 p.m. And then when I checked like an hour later, it was like, oh, now it's been rescheduled for like February 11th or whatever. And I was like, well, what?
Wait a minute.
What was that?
It's like, wait a minute. I've had that happen a few times. It's thankfully a rare happenstance, but yeah.
I think we have some issues at the local postal department, but I'm not 100% sure. But either way, we're gonna, when that comes, it's just a matter of getting it to Joel, and then we'll have the movie. So we might have to do one other film between then.
Hey, no complaints. I've been really enjoying the films we have been doing lately. So
yeah, I think I'm going to try to pick one that I haven't seen as well. I think that'll be a. There's one that I've been meaning to watch that I haven't seen that is on Prime, and so we might choose that one. Do you mind doing more recent ones, Joel? Is that an issue for you?
No, I like those ones from the 90s we were watching. Those are pretty good.
Okay. This is on the cusp. I think this was like 2000. So
that's pretty recent. That's more recent. That's maybe the most recent one we've done then.
Yeah. By the way, well, I'll ask you after the program. I don't want to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
But we'll be back, and until then, we will talk to you later.